the narrative.
Hey everybody, welcome to Forge the Narrative. My name is Paul Murphy, your host for Alabama Lost Souls podcast. This is episode 287. I haven't announced the number, but it's like a little mini game that I play with myself to see if when it comes time to write the show notes, if I remember which number we're on.
Wait, there's show notes?
287. Yes, there are show notes. Check them out. If you don't normally check them out, I think most of them come through on the link through the feeds, RSS feeds, but they are available up on forgenarrative.net. Along with some other stuff.
Oh, for the listeners. Okay, I got it.
Joined tonight by Chris Morgan.
How you guys doing?
And Josh Ginn.
Good evening, good morning, good day to all you out there.
Thanks for joining me tonight. In the middle of this show, I've got a segment to insert with Jim Vessel. He's been still out there tearing it up on the tournament scene. We actually talk about diagnosing some losses. So that's kind of a theme that we're having the next over the last couple of shows, and you'll see through the next shows coming up is really diagnosing what might have gone wrong in your game and how to change that so you aren't rehearsing failure over and over again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to listening to that. That guy's out there absolutely tearing it up right now. I mean, he might have such a huge lead by the time the LVO comes. He may have an insurmountable lead. That's how much work he's doing. So kudos to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And then during the segment that we do, and no spoilers, you're going to hear it in 20 or so minutes. But I watched part of his game that he was doing in the BAO where he's fighting against Jeff Robinson. And there's a moment in that game that's a flashy moment. You know, I'm like, oh man, when that happened, that was a really tough moment. He's like, no, wait a second. I'd rather go back and think about how I even let that occur to begin with. Like, he's like how he could, that was preventable if he had done some things before that. And it was really interesting to hear his thought process. You know, and I'm like, well, you know, don't necessarily Monday morning quarterback yourself. I mean, you know, I'm not saying that his decisions were bad. He's like, well, you know, obviously hindsight being 2020, but his thought process of maybe what he should have done then, there's a real big case for it. And it's really cool to see someone that's performing or hear someone that's performing at the top of their game make that diagnosis of themselves. And I think it's something that we can all benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good to be able to hear someone who is so fluent in their own list that they're not talking about what they did wrong or the fact that they didn't roll the dice accordingly to get the result they wanted, but they can actually look at the game itself and say, okay, what did I not do or do to appropriately shape the term that I'm on to put myself into a position to do what my list needs to do and not either get outmaneuvered or outplayed in some other way. So yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah,
so to hear that, just really objectivity coming from someone playing so well right now was cool. And I also make mention of his Instagram, so because he's an amazing painter too. So check it out, listen to the segment, let us know what you think about that. So this whole process of kind of trying to get better at the game, looking at things and diagnosing maybe if you're not winning as often as you think you should, what could be some things to do. You know, I listen out for things as I'm consuming media for myself. So I'm checking out these videos on YouTube, and they got this series called, it's like the Masterclass series where they get people at the top of their game come in and do these series of classes to, you know, not necessarily tutorials, but you get a deep kind of dive into the method behind some of these people. I'm talking about like Gordon Ramsay did a cooking masterclass. Steve Martin did a masterclass on comedy. So serious stuff, right? And there's a poker player named Daniel Negreanu, and he is in the little ad for it. I watch the ads, for these particular things. He mentions that when you think you've learned everything there is to learn about whatever you're doing and you stop trying to learn, that's when everyone else passes you.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty common type saying.
Yeah. Right.
I get it.
Oh, but you know, again, coming from a master, that makes you wake up, you kind of perk up and listen. You're like, oh, well, yeah, you're right. And it's easy to get complacent. So I think that fits right in line with some of the topics we're talking about, which is, how to really diagnose what the root cause of maybe your problem or your issue or loss might have been, and not just always chalk it up to dice.
Yeah, absolutely. At work, we always, like, long time ago, we used to have a lot of posters on the wall, like, somewhere out there, your enemy's training. What are you doing? You know, and it was basically to guilt you into going to the gym. You know, like, oh, I should go work out. You know, like,
somebody start playing the Rocky theme.
Yeah, right. So I mean, but no, it's good to be introspective instead of just scoffing. Oh, dice. You're right. I mean, I think that's probably the first instinct, because no one wants to take a critical eye and criticize or constructively criticize your own play. But I mean, you should always ask your opponent, hey, where do you think I messed up, or especially if it's against a list or something you're not familiar with playing, or you're learning, or you just want to know. Like, always say, hey, what, and then not to be impolite, but always offer that information back to your enemy. Like, hey, is anything curious about my list you want to know about? And you say, hey, I felt really secure doing this when I saw you do that, because then I knew I could do the following, or I had this. That's when I'm accustomed to popping this stratagem, and some other people who, if you're playing a niche army, like if you're a Gene Stealer cult player, or I don't know, what's something you don't see too. In my area, I don't see a lot of Mechanicum or something. Maybe there's something like that out there that's creeping, and if you want to get good at it in preparation for a tournament, you should be asking those types of questions and having that exchange.
Yeah, especially a close game, or you even if you got to win, think about what could be differently and have that dialogue with your opponent.
Yeah, Paul, I think you remember meeting Lou Rollins, who was the hobby track champion for ITC this last year. But that's one of the things that he's best at when you play games with him. When I was playing in the last round of the War Games for Warriors, and it's something that's consistent with Lou. He's always looking to improve his game. He's always asking, what are the things that I did that helped you the most? Or how do you think I could use this unit better? It has to be a constant journey and adaptation for your list design and your gameplay.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if you can move towards a reality to where you're making a lot more deliberate choices, and not always just reacting or going with whatever's in the moment right then, but you have to. I'm not saying don't do that. You got to be able to pivot and stuff. And there are some lists out there that perform better as reactive lists. Probably if you can make a go second list all the time, you're doing better at 40k right now than a lot of people.
Not to water down the conversation off 40k, but that's a strong theory in list building right now in Age of Sigmar, that if you can build because they have the revolving you go, I go. There's always, you could get the chance for the double turn, or there's a greater chance of going first or second based off the number of drops you have. So if you're not building an intentionally low drop army, you're almost incentivized to build a high drop go second type army. So in the event you do get to go first, you still have tools to do such, but, more often than not, you're never out of the game or out of position right away.
So, as I start to refine my list, get in tournament shape, this is a journey I'm on as well. There are things that, I can tell when I'm a little bit off my game. And like back in Adepticon, I felt my target priority not being strong. Like, I felt myself making target priority mistakes. And it took me a little while to really think that. I even justified it to myself at the time, like, oh, well, that's the thing that can hurt me. But I really wasn't in a position to eliminate that threat. I should have been trying to score objective points, or doing something else, or maybe even playing more defensive, like being out of range or something, instead of trying to get up there and pepper a couple of sprinkle a couple of ineffective blows on them.
I think you got to give yourself more credit than that, because you're still making an informed decision with the tools you have at hand and, what's on the table. And sometimes, hey, I've got to play for a win right here. I can't play for a tie. I can't play for a maybe, so I have to take the statistical or mathematically, less optimal option and put it sometimes in the hands of the dice, and, try to get the haymaker. But obviously, when you do that, you've got to be able to look at the other end and not have a feel badsy that's self-inflicted. So,
yeah, I completely agree. But I think where I'm saying is I was going a little bit more instinctual and maybe making what I thought were informed decisions. But when I look back, I didn't have all the right numbers for the equation.
Mm-hmm, I heard it.
Yeah. So, this is the stuff I'm talking about. Like, looking back and really thinking about what was I doing wrong and not what this situation occurred. Like, how did this happen? Oh, it's magic or luck, blind luck or whatever. Like, yeah, take advantage of that when it works for you. But like, how can you take luck out of the equation more often? And so some of the things we're talking about with like identifying what the actual holes in your strategy are when you're list building and how to fill it. And that's what I've been really looking at with this guard list that I'm talking about. I've got special weapon squads with like melta guns hide inside a Stormlord. I don't see that very often out there right now, but I think it's going to solve a particular issue. I was talking with a buddy of mine about we mentioned night spinners on the show not that long ago, but did you know there's a heavy weapon platform that you can put a night spinner gun on?
Yes, I did.
I mean, it's a Doomweaver or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking to the guy who has magical Christmas Fantasyland dreams about D cannons coming out of a Wraith Gate and popping 24-inch D shots on another guy and just wrecking their army. I mean, it's pure fantasy, but I just dream of that. I'm gonna go
on record right now saying that's not a good idea. The
Wraith Gates are so impossible to place on the table in a good position. It's totally undoable. But in my mind's eye, I'm like, oh man, those 3D cannons are coming out and it's GG right then and there, right? And what's it probably going to do? Like a couple, mortal wounds on some tank and then, then die.
You're going to kill one Ogren.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you might do 4 wounds to Mortarion.
Exactly.
Probably more than that. I mean, I'm of course joking around a little bit, but things that can fire indirect fire are really strong right now because of the terrain phenomenon that we're seeing. And one of the things that we talk about in the show, and certainly not to start, a terrain gate or whatever, but the actual play experience that how it plays out on a table. So like how we talk about a little bit in this next segment about maybe how a complete city-themed board with all these fully enclosed ruins, or not even ruins, fully enclosed buildings, may not give the best play experience over the life of the tournament. So maybe you have to compromise a little bit of the theme at your event for playability. But,
absolutely.
But whatever. That's a little bit of an aside. What we're for in the list building stage is like, since that exists, what do you then take that helps circumvent that, to help reduce what your bad matchups will be and give you the tools to actually change what your maximum games in that tournament you're going to win? If you can squeak out another win, if you're used to winning 3 games, you could get that extra win, then you've dramatically changed what your placing in the tournaments are. So what is that solution? I don't know that Doomweavers or whatever is it, but if your army has things that are fairly point efficient, or at least not super inefficient, and give you indirect fire, you probably want to look at taking them in your list.
So that's one of the reasons why I tend to go with quad mortars when I'm building Space Marine lists. Now, there are certain armies that have access to Thunderfire cannons. Mine is not one of them. Thunderfire cannons, of course, work. There's also some benefit to bringing those because they let you play with your opponent's movement quite a bit. So I think that's one of those answers that you're looking for that addresses multiple problems when you can get, say, a mobile unit that all of a sudden has to slow to a crawl. But just having the indirect fire in several of my games with quad mortars has made a difference in ways that, I can't accomplish with maybe a unit of assault marines or whatever that I'm deep striking in. Like there are certain things that make that a better choice in every circumstance.
I think another way to maybe phrase that to some people, and we're probably wandering a bit here though, is just like, what is your army's second wind, right? Like everyone's got, their strong hand that they've got an initial offensive unit that's, this is my unit that kills X. And then not every army has
the haymaker, yeah.
Yeah, right? Like Hellblasters or, I don't know, whatever. Insert strong unit, right? But then
Telemon Dreadnought. There you go, yeah.
Sure, right? Not every unit or an army, has the same unit twice or can afford points-wise to have that same replicated capability. Maybe your second wind of your army is actually board control, right? Maybe it's resiliency. Maybe it's resiliency in a couple of different ways. Either a unit that's just extremely high in numbers and can tank wounds through model count, or it has high wounds, low models with a healing type ability, and you can tank. So you're accomplishing asymmetric missions. Take and hold. You're getting those extra points. Not necessarily with your unit that always just tables someone or is shooting someone, because if that thing goes down or something happens, you always want to have a way to interact. But part of being an expert with your list is knowing exactly how much juice you can squeeze out of some of those, we'll say, like lesser capabilities, right? That's not to say that there aren't armies out there that all they do is kill, 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 right? And that's probably optimal. But certainly an aggressive army that just does nothing but goes forward is prone to meeting, if that's a rock, it can meet paper on a given day. So just trying to blend those things in that understanding of your army is what's really going to round you out, I think.
I think that was demonstrated. Your point was demonstrated just perfectly by Brandon Grant in the LVO finals, where the thing that won him the game was that he had models at the end of the game. The way he chose his target priority is he got rid of the things that could easily take out large numbers of his infantry models. And by doing so, he had the models he needed to score those end of game objectives that won him the 40k championships. I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, I like that. In the army composition, that's some excellent perspective. Is like I like the way you put that. What's the second wind? What is the alternate wind condition for when whatever you're planning on, your first plan has gone to pot. And then another level deeper is taking things that specifically position you well for what the meta is, including what could be just terrain features that you would prefer not to have to deal with or that you weren't accounting for originally.
I think it's kind of funny when you think about scouting the terrain, so to speak, for an event that's coming up. It's like, okay, if I go to this event, I know that they've got this kind of terrain, so that's going to benefit my list in this way. We are splitting hairs so much in 40k strategy right now, it makes me laugh.
Well,
it's awesome, and it's fun.
Yeah, the physics of the game are incredibly important. I mean, they are the terrain is the third man. What is it? What's the analogy for football? The 12th man on the field or whatever.
Yeah, the third player.
It's the third player in the game. You take it, back to just the practicality of things you can control is, the physics of movement and how you can move and how it interacts with the terrain is, if you can master that, you're going to win more games right there. So, the objectively looking at your past performance, adding in some stuff to your list that specifically addresses things that you will practically see right there, and then mastering the physics of the game, then you're winning 5 games in a row. That's simple, right?
Yeah. Put that in the tape. Call everyone out there. Just call your mom. Go back to her house. Pick up your Teddy Ruxpin. Put the tape in the Teddy Ruxpin when you go to bed tonight. Listen to that over and over again, and you'll win all your games from here on out. You'll be.
Or you'll have really terrible nightmares. One of those two things.
Let's take a quick break. We'll come back after a word from our sponsor with Jim, and then we'll come back, and it'll be us again after that. See you in a minute.
FTN is brought to you by Discount Games Inc. Please visit them at www.discountgamesinc.com. And don't forget to ask Jay about ways to save even more on your hobby projects.
Hey everybody, welcome to a Player Spotlight segment of Ford's Narrative. I'm Paul. I got Jim Vessel here.
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
Jim, thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Obviously, we want to pick your brain. You're still killing it out there.
I've had 2 tournaments, I think, since we spoke last, BAO, and I just actually competed in the Beefwing Brawl this weekend. So I did pretty good, but didn't win in either of them, which is unfortunate.
No big deal, man. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
What do we say? If you don't lose occasionally, you're not playing enough games, or you're not playing the right people.
Yeah, I mean, I played BAO is 9 games I played. Because it's 6 games, and then the top 8 go to a 8-person single elimination. So I played 6 games, and after day 2, I was the only 6-0 player, so I was the top of the rankings going into the top 8 elimination. And then I ended up winning my first 2 games, getting into the final. And I played Jeff In Control Robinson. I'm sure some of you guys have heard of him. He's a fairly famous Warhammer personality and StarCraft as well. And we actually played on, you can actually check the games out on, Frontline Gaming's Twitch stream. And I think they're putting up the games on YouTube now, but, we had a really, really good game. He's a great opponent. His has a really, really tough list. I was doing really well. I think going into turn 4, I was ahead, and then the game we had a huge swingy turn 4, and there's, 2 or 3 things that happened that, kind of caused the game to turn around. And
my heart sank. Sorry to jump. My heart sank when he got that 6 roll on the Vindicare shot to take it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to happen every now and then, but it didn't need to happen right then,
Yeah, and honestly, analyzing that game, it's always, I think a lot of players, especially newer players or maybe mid-level players, they look at that dice roll and they say, oh, well, Jeff rolled that 6, so he was really lucky and that's why he won, right? But the way I look at that is that I gave him the opportunity to roll that 6. So, I went back and actually watched all my stream games, which is actually something that I find really, it's really weird that I find enjoyable, even though I know the outcome and I know exactly what happens and I actually played in the game. It's not even like I'm watching someone else's stream game, right? Like I'm watching my own game.
You can Monday morning quarterback yourself. It's okay.
And I wanted to go back and replay the game so I could see where was it that I made mistakes that led to the kind of outcome of that game. And the mistake that I made was actually in my turn 3. And specifically, after my turn 2, I had cleared out all his Graia Admech that were in this kind of central building. And the Vindicare was sitting on top of the this kind of building in the middle. And had I moved my Demon Princes to get him to be closest for smite, I could have smited him right out on my turn 3. And I smite that guy out. I get a kill. The Vindicare goes away. And all of a sudden, I keep my arm in, and that totally changes the game. So that play there that I didn't do, or I didn't take, was where in my head I lost the game. Mm-hmm. Whereas a lot of people will look at that replay and say, oh, he lost the game because Jeff rolled that 6. Oh. But where I lost the game was I let Jeff roll a 6. You know what I mean?
I see your perspective on that. And I meant that it was just a clear moment of like, oh, that, could have gone a different way.
Yeah, no, for sure. And don't get me wrong, like, this is a dice-based game. There will be so many things that you do that statistically should go one way or go the other. But, if you're really playing at a high level, you got to account for those kinds of statistical variances. And there's actually 2 other points where the same thing occurred, which was when my Corn Prince failed to kill his Calidus tank and had 1 wound left. And that was even with rerolls. He rolled, I think he rolled 4 out of 6, 5+ invulnerables. And had he failed 1 more, I would have killed it. Mm-hmm. And then I had a pretty horrendous, 2 very back-to-back horrendous psychic phases in turn 4 and 5. And just those kind of, now any one of those instances, I don't lose the game, right? But it's the aggregate of all those, let's say death by 1,000 cuts, right? Like, I didn't lose the game. I was in a position where any one of those things failing would have cost me the game, but it was the kind of culmination of all those things together. And on top of that, Jeff's he's an amazing player, which means, and this is, I give all the credit to Jeff. After his turn 3, he changed the way he was playing in order to win the game. And what I mean by that is, he was playing fairly defensive for the first 3 turns. He was sitting back in his deployment zone. He was shooting me, and that was the game he was probably used to playing, that kind of defensive, more waiting for me to come to him and then countering. If he continued to play the game like that, he would have lost. And so he saw that the only way he's going to win is to play super aggressive. And, he started charging me with his tanks. He started charging me with his characters. And the way that he was able to use his tanks to kind of jump over my lines into my backfield, start clearing out stuff, was really, really smart. And and I told him afterwards, I said, he asked me, he was like, were you surprised about what the tanks could do? And I said, no, I know their stats. I know how they move. I know like all those things. What surprised me was how you use them. And that's something that
fly. It's the one that's got the 2 like big cannons on the top, and it's a tank with fly.
Yeah. And it moves 14 inches, which is very fast with fly. And he was, jumping up on top of ruins and shooting downwards into my characters. So the way he was able to kind of change his gameplay to adjust on the fly, that's something that takes a lot of skill, because a lot of players, once they're kind of on that losing path, they oftentimes will stick to that strategy, and they aren't able to adjust like that. And obviously all the credit to Jeff. So that was a tough loss. But I'm super proud with how I did. It was my first time going to BAO, so to come second out of, I think, 150 players, nothing to cry about, nothing to get upset about. That was a really great event.
That's really impressive. And that kind of dovetails into one of the other topics we've had over the last couple of shows, is really using the physics of the game to your advantage and being able to really make some tactical plays with how that stuff works. And like charging things with wave serpents and stuff is an underutilized tactic, if you ask me. And something like using that fly mechanic to get to where you can get more advantageous shots on characters and stuff is that's how you can squeak out close games.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that maneuver he pulled on me. So he ran his Caladius on top of a ruin. And so I had a few characters down below and some plague bears, but because they're all on the ground floor, they're equidistant, right, from his tank. So he gets to actually choose. So technically the characters can be closest. And so he was able to target my characters that way. And that's actually a move that when I'm playing against a list with flyers, I see that coming a mile away. That's a move that people with flyers, Hemlocks, Crimson Hunters, I know that trick. I've seen it 100 times. I didn't see it with those tanks because I just didn't think that he would use them like a flyer versus a tank, so I'm thinking in my head, this is a tank. So just those kinds of moves. And then he was able to kind of get in my backlines and charge plague bears. And what that actually enabled him to do is it just slowed me down, right? So I can't advance if I fall back. Plus, it kind of forces my movement, and he knows his guys have fly, so he can just pop out of there with no repercussions. So for him, there's no disadvantage for him to charge me.
I mean, I'm telling you, I haven't used it with those tanks, but I have used it. I mean, it feels dirty when you're doing it with things like wave serpents or stuff that has the ability to capitalize on that.
Yeah, for sure. So that was a tough game, and congratulations again to Jeff. He's well deserved. So I'm really happy for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you I don't know if you can look back. I mean, you said you watched the video and looking back at yourself, but when you say you did not move up to make them the closest, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you actively did it or if it was just something that didn't occur. What would you have sacrificed? Like, what was your plan? And then do you still feel like that was the right way, even if you'd rolled average, with that assassin shot?
So I think in my head, and this was ultimately where it kind of fell apart. I sacrificed. So what I was doing, I was playing the game that I play, which is board control, sit on my objectives, play reactive. And what happened was I wanted to get that bonus point, right? So you need a character. We're playing Crucible of Champions, which is mission 6 in the ITC Champions missions. And you get a bonus point if you have a character on each 3 objectives at the end of your turn. Now, I wanted that bonus point, so I didn't want to move my Demon Princes off those objectives to go snipe that character. But in retrospect, that one bonus point that I would have maybe not gotten that turn was much less important than getting rid of that assassin. Because that assassin then went on to basically it killed 2 characters. It killed a Terminator Sorcerer and Armin, which was a huge, huge swing. So that's 2 Headhunter points, which is what he took. It also took me off another objective, gave him kills, gave him severely dampened my psychic ability. So that kind of short term, that I guess I kind of got greedy. That short turn, and his assassin had done so poorly the first 3 turns. I didn't.
It's tough, man.
I didn't clue that. Okay, well, if he starts rolling hot, all of a sudden, that's bad for me. So, and that's exactly what happened, right? So,
yeah, but you're playing with discipline. I guess it's tough for me to go, yeah, you should have done that, or to enforce that decision, or to support that decision, because you were actually playing disciplined. But I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. It's a tough call.
Yeah, again, that's not a move that, that's probably a move I do make. So here's the thing. If we're not playing that mission, if we're playing any other mission, I make that move because there's no reason for those characters to be there. But in my head, I was thinking, getting these bonuses is going to win me the game. I'll just run away with a score, right? And so, I kind of left that long. I almost, a lot of times they say plan for the long term, not the short term. Mm-hmm. And I was over planning for the long term and not seeing the threats that were right in front of me there. The immediate threats. I was kind of I was playing for the end of the game rather than that turn. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that was part of it. So, but yeah, I mean, mistakes happen, and Jeff played a perfect game from turns 4 to 6, and at the end I managed to kind of claw my way back a little bit in turn 6, but it was just too little, too late at that point, and I made a few other mistakes, but nothing that was unrecoverable from. So
no, you stayed scrappy the whole time. It was a fun game to watch. So I encourage people to go check it out. For sure. I'd like to point out your army is beautiful. Like we mentioned that you're on Instagram the last time we had you on. I don't know if we told people exactly where to find you, but you kind of like a triple threat. You play, you can talk about it, and you can paint. Like, what's going on over there?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've always been the competitiveness of myself. That's actually more of a new thing. I've always been the hobby guy. I've always even when I didn't play Warhammer, and I had a few years where I kind of took breaks, I still painted, and I've always enjoyed painting and having a beautiful army, and just that's the part that is the most relaxing for me. I really like competition because I'm a very competitive guy, but at the end of the day, for me, playing with a fully painted, well painted army, that is for me the ultimate. So, I care a lot about how my models look, and I put a lot of time into my painting. It can be a bit like, keeps my meta game a little bit slow because, like right now I'm trying to, I won't even generally play with unpainted models, even at like the club, and I won't play with proxies, and I don't like to borrow stuff. Like I'm a very purist in that. Like, I won an army from, I think I maybe mentioned it last time, but I won an army from Adepticon for winning Adepticon, and I was like, I didn't want this army because I was never going to play with an army I didn't paint, and so I'm such a purist in that sense. Like, I won't even play with it because it's just kind of against my mantra. So, but yeah, it's something that I've always done, and since I started playing Warhammer, the painting side has always been what kept me going when I didn't get to play a lot. So.
What is your Instagram so people can check it out?
It's Jimbo, so JIMBOOV, as in, and then _ paints. So yeah, you can find me there.
Yeah, definitely encourage it. It's really neat. I mean, sometimes you see people playing at the top of the game, and there's obviously a hobby compromise with their list, or with their appearance or whatever.
Yeah, and like, look, I got nothing wrong with those, that. Like, at the end of the day, like, everyone gets something different out of the hobby. And, I know guys that literally, like, they will never paint. They don't even like to paint. Like, they'd rather either play with gray plastic or commission paint everything. And that's totally fine, right? I think what I love about this hobby is that there's so many different aspects to it. Like, whether it's the background, you can play, there's different ways to play, just even the game. You got open, you got narrative, you got match play. And then outside of that, kind of the bigger hobby, you got painting and modeling, you got, your terrain building, you got, the fluff. Like I'm a big fluff geek too. Like, I'm just finishing up The Buried Dagger, which is, I think, book 54 of the Horus Heresy. So I'm like basically caught up. I've been, I can't, I read all tons of Black Library books. Like, I love reading those stories. Like, so I can't get enough of it. Right. And I think at the end of the day, the great thing is like, you can enjoy it in whichever way you want. So
no slight on my part. I just mean that's still, it is a bit of a minority to find someone that with all of this stuff wrapped up into one package. That's all I'm saying. It's cool to see.
Yeah. And I'm, for me, like, also, like, I'm glad to be able to show, and I think there's, I don't want to call it a stigma, but definitely, I mean, as someone that's played competitively, and I think we've all kind of been there, which is that there's a stigma that, like, competitive players, a lot of them are win at all costs. They don't really care about anything but, like, just playing the grossest list, and they'll literally just play with gray plastic. So I'm glad to be able to break that stereotype a little bit and show that you can be very competitive. You can really care about things like the background and the fluff, and you can really, and you can field a really nice army and put a lot of effort into your painting as well. So it doesn't have to be this kind of evil competitive, player, stereotype that there is, so I'm glad I'm able to kind of break that mold a little bit and show people that, we're not all bad. So,
I like getting my teeth kicked in by a beautifully painted army. So I'm cool with that. Actually, I'm cool with whatever. You can tell when your opponent's tried. It doesn't, I mean, there's different levels of stuff. And you mentioned that, we all get different things out of the hobby, and some people, maybe they like to put paint on the models, but they're just not great at painting, and it's not their thing. It doesn't matter. It's all, I mean, there's so many different ways and hours we can burn it in this hobby. It's one of the best things.
For sure. And at the end of the day, the thing with painting, and a lot of people ask me, what's the key or what's the trick? Well, I mean, I think as a painter, now you're in the golden age, right? So when I started painting, there was no YouTube, there was no, there was no way to, like, look online. Like, I literally would go into Games Workshop, and I'd sit there, and someone would show me how to do something, show me how to highlight, show me how to, I had to do it in person. And now, you got contrast paints, you got YouTube. There's so much content out there from great artists that are showing you guys how to do it. There's so many new tricks, and just even the paint range is so much bigger than it used to be. Yeah. It's so much more accessible to be able to paint a nice army, that I think that if you are maybe a player out there that tried it once and thought it was too hard, I definitely encourage you to give it another go. So.
Totally agree, man. Speaking of Horus Heresy stuff you mentioned a second ago, had a buddy of mine message me. He's just started reading the series.
Okay.
And wants to know how we should progress through all the books. And I told him to read the first 4 and then hit me up, and we'll plot him a course from there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I read them in order, so of release. Now, I'm speaking specifically of the main novels. There's about 1 million Horus Heresy short stories, audio, like, excerpts, like, all sorts of stuff that they have. And I think in a lot of cases they do compile them into these kind of omnibuses, which is like 7 to 10 of the different short stories. there are a few books in the series that drag, and I think you could probably even skip. They don't really add much to the overall narrative. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you're going to bother reading a 54-book series, you might as well read all of them in order. That's kind of the way that I did it. Well, partly because, I started reading them, I believe actually that was in 2004, and that is, 2014. And that's actually what got me back into Warhammer. So, funny story, I had been out of the hobby for about 7 years. I still kind of followed the Games Workshop and kind of what was going on, but I hadn't been playing since 6th edition Fantasy. And I decided to go to Europe. I was in Europe for 2 months, and I needed some reading material, so I grabbed Horus Rising, I think is the first one, and Galaxy in Flames, I believe is the second one. So I had the first 3 novels of the Horus Heresy with me to read, because I was like, these seem kind of cool, I'll read them. And literally, for 2 months, I backpacked around Europe, and I think by the time I got home, I had read like up to book 17, because like every time I'd be traveling on a train or on a bus or wherever I was going, I couldn't get enough of these novels, and all I wanted to do while I was in Europe was to get home so I could go start playing 40k. Like I got so hyped reading all these novels while I was away on vacation that as soon as I got home, I like went to my GW, I like picked up some paints, and I was like right back into it. So it was such a cool kind of like way to kind of get back into the hobby, and they're such cool novels.
They really are. Such an amazing job of that stuff.
Yeah, so I'm excited to kind of hear how he goes with it.
Well, it's just neat to see that there are still people that are just now getting into it. And it can be a lot to digest. You're like, oh, you got to read 50 books before Solar War comes out in mass release in October or whatever. Get to it.
Right, and I think the biggest thing too is like, I don't even think I realized there's that. I think, since I've started reading them, I think when I started there's only around 17, 18 books. And now it's gone crazy, but they're fairly quick reads. I mean, depending on how fast of a reader you are, I would highly recommend looking into the audiobooks. I have the first, I think, 20 books that I read, but since then I've been super into the audiobooks. I have an Audible subscription, and so you can get the books for about $15 a month. You get like 1 free credit. You can redeem that towards a book. And the production quality on the audiobooks is amazing. It's not just like, an author reading it. There's it's a really great narration. Sometimes there's like sound effects in some of them. They're almost more like audio plays.
I listened to
like
Scars
old radio plays.
The White Scars one. It was epic.
Yeah. And it's great to listen to when you paint. And there's not like that's what I listen to when I paint, and that's how I was able to kind of get through them all, because I paint and I throw in an audiobook and off I go.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so we talked about BAO. And then you just went to another one recently.
Yeah, so I played in Beefing Brawl, run by the club that runs it actually is called the Beefing Wing. So it's pretty cool club. They were actually my teammates at Adepticon. They were some of the guys that I played in the team tournament with, and they run an event out of Buffalo, New York. This year it was I think there was 98 players, and yeah, sure enough, it was very hot in Buffalo. I'm not used to this East Coast heat, to be honest, so I was having a hard time, and it wasn't even that hot.
You think that far north, it would be a lot cooler, but it's still, yeah.
Yeah, it was super hot. So it was a 5-round tournament, which was a little bit unfortunate because with 100 players, it actually meant there was 3 undefeated. And we tried a last minute petition to get them out of 6th game, but it kind of it was a little late for that. So I played after my 4th game, I was actually in 1st place. And it was me, Nick Nonavati, and TJ Lanigan, who's my both good friend and fellow Chaos player, but also nemesis. So of course the 3 of us, it's both also amazing players, Nick and TJ. And so me and Nick ended up playing. So we got Clash of the Titans here, and Nick and I actually played about a month ago at the Canadian Tabletop Championships in Ottawa, and we played in our round 3, I believe, or in our round 4, and I beat Nick by 1 point. So even gods can bleed, as they say.
Hey, a win is a win. Might as well be by a million points.
Sure.
So
yeah, and so he was playing his Gene Seer called Sven, and I was playing my Chaos list now, and I haven't changed my list since then. So he came back with a list, and he literally said this to me. He said, Colin Sherman, who runs the Best in Best in Faction podcast, and John Lennon of Brohammer fame, who are all both other excellent Gene Stealer Cult players. They literally have their own Gene Stealer Cult chat group, and they had 3 of them. So 3 of the best Gene Stealer Cult players, Tyranid players in the world, were colluded together to build a list to beat me. So up until the tournament, they were actually putting together ideas on like what list that they would bring to beat me specifically. And funny enough, I was supposed to go to another tournament a few weeks ago called Storm of Silence, and Colin, who was going to be there, brought this basically the same list that Nick was playing at this tournament. And I ended up dropping at the last minute because I just needed a little bit of a timeout. And Colin got really mad at me because he was like, man, I even wrote this list with Nick to take you out. So he got mad at me. So anyway, so we faced off in a pretty epic game. It was a tough game for me because the terrain, there was probably around, I'm just trying to think, there's 12 enclosed ruins on the table. And,
oh yeah, that's rough when you're playing Gene Stealers.
Yeah, it was basically like a table of houses. It was like a city block that wasn't ruined. So it was the only non-ruined city in 40k is apparently we were playing in. So, and if for those that don't know, the rules for enclosed ruins are kind of a beast of frontline gaming, but essentially they are ruins that are enclosed on all 4 sides, and infantry can move into them, but otherwise, if you're not infantry, you can't move in and out. So of course he's got an all infantry army. Mostly he brought 3 Leman Russ tank commanders to kind of pound into the dust, but everything else was infantry. So he was essentially able to hop building to building, kind of like like Rainbow Six style, in towards me. And because everything was in buildings almost the entire game, I wasn't able to smite him. I wasn't able to cast at him because all my demon princes can't go in the buildings.
You can't go in. Everything's out of line of sight. Everything's
out of line of sight. Exactly. So we played a super close game, and it actually came down to the very last turn. I had to make it. I was down 4 points going into the final turn, and I made a kind of a Hail Mary play that worked. To kind of pull ahead, or to kind of, I pulled ahead by 1, I believe. And then his turn 6, he had to do 2 things. He had to do 1 thing, and he there's a play that he made that I don't think a lot of players would see. But basically, because of the way I had done my stuff, I denied him. I'd killed everything in one of his table quarters. But of course, Leman Russ tank commanders get a ability to move themselves again. So he was able to basically launch a Leman Russ about 25 inches across the table from one corner into another, which gave him a recon, and he ended up winning by 1 point.
Yeah,
so I beat him previously by 1 point, and he beat me by 1 point.
Might as well have been a million.
Yeah, and so that was a really, really tough game, and Nick's an excellent opponent, and I always enjoy playing him. But unfortunately, and this is kind of the bad part about a 5-game tournament, TJ, who's in third, didn't have to play a really hard player. He got to actually play a Custodes with his 1,000 Suns. Now, if you're a Custodes player and you've ever played 1,000 Suns, it doesn't go so well for you. So he got so many points.
Even
he got 41
with
points.
their 6-up, feel no pain versus mortal wounds or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, so the guy that was playing him apparently, TJ said he basically consigned himself to losing before the game even started.
Oh, that's right.
And he just kind of turned around and exposed his rear, so to speak, to TJ. And so TJ goes on, and think about this for a sec. And this is kind of maybe my one time to kind of be a little bit bitter, but
to moan a bit. That's okay. Nobody's listening.
So
it's fine.
You're 4-0 at a 100-person GT, and in your 5th game against another 4-0 player, he gives up 41 points. Like, that seems really crazy. Like, how do you get 4-0? How do you go 4-0 and then lose so badly in your 5th game? You know what I mean? So that was unfortunate. And what that meant was that actually TJ leapfrogged both of us into first place, and he obviously won. So well deserved for TJ.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I get for trying to win the old-fashioned way, which is by beating the best other really good players instead of I should go back to maybe trying to submarine in the tournament.
I mean, that's the way it works out sometimes. I mean, even in the best let's just say the best situations. Sometimes you can just look over and table 2 is one guy's clearly just outlisted, or whatever.
Right.
There's something going on over there you're over there fighting and sweating, in a knife fight, like everything's on the line, and they're over there in a cakewalk.
Yeah, and the thing is, even if I beat Nick at that point, I still wouldn't have won because TJ still would have leapfrogged both of us, right? So it kind of felt there's a bit of feel badsies, I think, both between me and Nick on who thought like, we felt like we were playing to win the tournament, but really like we'd already both lost. You know what I mean? So that was kind of the unfortunate part.
You guys know you left it on the table.
Yeah, and we had a good game, and I'm always happy to play Nick. So that was my other tournament. So
positioning and moving around, and again, that's one of the things that if you get really good at that, then half your games are going to be easier for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what are your feelings on things like? I mean, it's the magic boxes. I mean, it's in our vernacular now, and I don't know. I think they're sometimes placed a little bit too liberally on the table, or ruled that way to be a little too liberal on the table, as if evidenced by what you just described. Am I wrong in feeling that way?
No, I think you're pretty right. Like, I'm a ex-fantasy player, so that was always my game. And, the thing that we used to say with fantasy was that the movement phase was the most important part of the game. And I think that 100% applies to 40k. A lot of people think that the shooting phase or the, combat phase are the most important phases, but the movement phase really is where good players, I'll take that back slightly. Movement is the most important part of the game.
Anytime you're moving models,
so
I was going to say
anytime you're moving, yeah. So obviously you get to move a little bit in sometimes in the shooting phase and sometimes in the combat phase. And obviously those are really important, but movement is the most important mechanic in the game. And ultimately, I think, if you can master the how to move, I think that's where it really separates like good players from kind of middle players, is just their ability to kind of see those moves.
Yeah, I'm with you. So, with the terrain, though, I mean, do you think like this whole phenomenon of the magic boxes? I mean, where do you think the game is at with that?
Well, I mean, I think 8th edition 40k, I think is like the best edition so far they've come out with. I think the biggest weakness is the terrain rules in general. I feel like the GW kind of rulebook terrain rules are they're almost like too simple. So you have ruins, and then you have like craters, and then you have forests, and that's about it. Now Frontline's gone and kind of created this enclosed ruin debacle, I guess. And I would say that it's not bad when there's one or two of those on a table, because then it's the game doesn't become about that. But in our specific game, we had about 12 of them. So the game became, it had an undue impact on the game. So, you never want the terrain to feel like it skews the game so far in one direction that one player either can't win or has a massive uphill battle due to the terrain. Now, obviously, I feel like things like, you need line of sight blocking terrain, but you don't want tables where nothing can see anything, right? And you also don't want tables where you can't hide at all, right? So when you get into those extremes, I think what it does is it creates those kind of very one-sided games. So if you're playing a tower army and there's literally nowhere, you can't see anything, that skews it against you, and then vice versa. If you're playing tower army and it's on a bowling ball, right? You're going to have a great game. So I really feel like it's on the TOs to make sure that the terrain is balanced, and I didn't feel like that was the case. If some and a perfect example is my buddy Jeff, who plays Genestealer Cult, was playing a 7 Eldar flyer list on the table next to us, and that had a bunch of enclosed ruins. He had so many enclosed ruins that he's able to hide his entire Genestealer army in enclosed ruins for the majority of the game. And so he ended up winning. Like, normally flyers are a bad matchup for Genestealers, but the fact that he was able to hide his entire army, there's so many enclosed ruins that he's able to hide his entire army in there for like 4 turns. That seems, that's as unfun as playing the 7 flyers to begin with. You know what I mean? So it doesn't sound like I'm hating on it when I'm not, because I think that this actual thing is pretty essential to helping balance some of those matchups like we're talking about. But when it becomes a dominating factor of a game, that seems to be a failure point. Yeah, and I think you want to be able to build a balanced list that's going to be able to play on multiple terrain types. So that Eldar flyer list, you better have some infantry to go into those ruins. Maybe you have some other elements that can act on different other pieces of terrain. So I think the idea is to have those, people always say, well, we want you to write a balanced list. We don't want you to skew it. But when you have extreme terrain, like all enclosed ruins, what it does is it creates skewed matchups, even if the lists are balanced. And so I kind of feel like, if you had 2 or 3 enclosed ruins and then you had, forests, craters, all sorts of other things, then it's like they take part in the game and they become a tactical element, but they don't define the game, right? And I feel like in our game against Nick and my buddy Jeff's game, they defined the game. The game wasn't about like ultimately, like, yeah, we played the game, but like the terrain made such a huge impact on the game that it almost felt like I don't know, like it feels like it kind of poisons the win a little bit.
What we're really talking about is TO's just being very specific about how they line up these tables, and while it may be thematic to have, oh, this is the city of whatever, like that might not be a great play experience depending on what armies are there.
Yeah, I actually really appreciate what Mike Brandt does with Nova, and he actually has like I like his mentality when it comes to the tables, which is, they set up the tables. You actually get the terrain set up in the player pack, so you know what each table is going to look like, and it's very even on both sides. And there's still elements that are going to be a factor in the game, but it's because every player gets the same table in every game. What I feel like that does is it removes that factor, right? And I actually feel like I think he has the right idea. Now that doesn't mean you can't have different tables. No one wants to play the same exact table over 5 games. But I think having that idea that the terrain it shouldn't matter what side someone gets, or it shouldn't matter, like the terrain should be there, but it shouldn't dominate. You know what I mean? And I kind of like the idea that, he's trying to take the extremes out of it. So. Well,
I mean, terrain is sometimes just a logistics issue for an organizer. And that's, so I don't want to make it seem like I'm being unsympathetic to that either. I'm just saying that when you look at all the stuff that you have that you can put on the table, maybe take that, go one step beyond and past the theme and what the actual play experience is. And maybe the experience works out better in your event.
Yeah, for sure. And, look, I got no hate. Like, the guys at Beef ran an amazing tournament.
Yeah, that's a long-standing tournament. They've been doing that for a while, from what I understand.
Yeah, and I'm not here to turn this into Train Gate or anything like that. But
no, I don't think you are. Yeah.
So, and then the last thing I'll say is, look, I can sit here and complain about terrain, but I'm not running a tournament, right? Like, what have I done lately as far as running tournaments? So, it's easy for me to sit here and complain, but, I didn't make terrain tables for them, and obviously I'm not the one actually running the tournament. So, you work with what you got, and if that's what they got, that's what they got.
Yeah, and I'm asking the questions, it's from a broader sense, it's like because movement's such an important thing, and then terrain, is going to influence that, I think. Whatever, it's just a broader topic in general.
For sure. And I think, they ran a great event, and, which, if you're out there as a TO, like, don't let the players, bully you too much and that kind of stuff. Like, play with what you have. And,
people want
and I know they had to borrow a lot of tables, so, it is what it is.
Well, and then we could just start seeing lists transform into, like, 7 Night Spinner batteries or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other ball game. I wish I could fit some mortars. I told Nick, I was like, I really wish I had Helpford Scorpius in my list against him. That would have been really nice. But
the Scorpius, right? I guess because it didn't go out of sight. And
yeah. That would have been nice.
yeah. Well, anyway, lists are going to evolve. I think we're in a great place in 40k with the thing that you just suggested to Scorpius, and I'm talking about like Night Spinner batteries or whatever, are actually kind of relevant, which is a neat topic unto itself.
For sure.
So what is next for you?
I'm supposed to play in an event on the 22nd and 23rd of June. I don't know if I'm going to go. I'm still kind of on the tournament hangover right now, and my last 3 tournaments, CTC, BAO, and Beef and Wing, I've lost I've lost on the top table in all 3 tournaments. So now that's not, a lot of players were like, Jim, like, what are you complaining about? That's an amazing accomplishment. You've gotten to the top table of 3 of the last 3 tournaments you've played, right? That's awesome. But, it's definitely, losing 3 in a row at that close to winning, it definitely has given me a bit of like a hobby, tournament depression, I guess.
Well, it's a grind too. I mean, you are literally grinding at some of these wins, and and you're actually going to a lot more tournaments than most people do. I mean, I feel like I travel a lot, and I'm going to 3 to 5 a year.
Yeah, so I'm feeling a little bit of that hangover right now. I'm gonna wait till probably the end of the week this week to see how I feel, and usually like by Thursday I'm like ready to play in a tournament again. Provided I don't go to that. After that, actually the next thing for me will be ATC in July. So I'm really that's actually something I'm really looking forward to, because a little less pressure playing in a team event, and it's a little bit more. I can be a little bit more. Yeah, well, I guess like the pressure is not all on me. I guess the pressure feels a little bit more divided.
Yeah.
We win as a team, you lose as a team. So, and I kind of feel like I'll maybe be I'm not going to be the one that gets in trouble for losing more of my games. There'll probably be other people on my team that will lose more, and they'll take the heat if things go south. So,
nice.
So I'm looking forward to that, and then we'll see what. I don't think I have much else for the rest of July after that.
I'm certainly not wishing any ill will on your team, but if anything happens, you can come be our coach. We would certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, I heard a certain other Canadian has been recruited to join you guys.
Yeah, we picked up Scary, so it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. It'll be good to see him down there. So I'm glad. It was funny because I actually tried to organize an ATC team within our the group of players that were all competing for the ATTC, and that obviously includes Scary. And I was kind of met with some groans and moans, and no one really wanted to kind of get anything together. So I'm glad he got to kind of participate because he was the only one that wanted to go outside of the group. So.
Well, it worked out. I mean, you never like to have someone on the team who can't make it, but the guy good things happened for him, and so he had to dip out of this one, and thankfully we were able to get such an accomplished player in his spot. So
yeah, and I'm sure there's no offense to the guy that dropped, but I'm sure it's it's probably an upgrade, most likely an upgrade as far as skill level, because Scary he actually just won a six game GT this weekend, so he's playing at the top of his game right now, and it's pretty hard to look at that as like a downgrade. So
no, I feel good about our team this year. I felt good before, but I feel like we're in a good position with an 8th in the list that we're taking. I'm actually trying to still refine my list. I got to shave 5 points out of my list somewhere. And whatever. This is where it gets down into the real tinkering. What am I doing with these points? How do I pull out, only 5 points? It's not going to happen. You're going to rip out 250 and try to figure out how to put 245 back in.
Yeah, I think I need to. I was talking with a few buddies after this weekend, and I think maybe the problem for me is I need to maybe shake up my list a little bit and maybe bring some new tricks and tools. I think people have seen my list. I've gone to 8 events with it since March. I don't know. I guess since February I've gone to about 8 events, and I've won 4 of those events, and I've top tabled in the other 4. So at this point, people have seen it.
Why change though? I mean, come on.
I know that's the hard part, because I'm like, well, it's not like I'm losing, like I'm going 2-3 or 3-2 or anything like that. It's like I'm literally losing 1 game for the championship. So it's kind of hard to mess with a good thing, but maybe those really high level opponents are starting to kind of catch on to it. So maybe I need to shake it up a little bit.
Well, and what do you think about the recent event of people taking like a bunch of Derridados and I know we talked about the Ex Machina or the Lord, whatever his name is, Lord Discordant and stuff. But, you're starting to actually you see that now.
Yeah, there's I got a few things on my painting queue. 3 Lord Discordants being one of them. I got some Decimators, and those Derridados are looking pretty nice too. I just got to figure out how I would fit them in my list. So, but definitely something I feel like could be a good addition to the list. I think there's something there, and I think the problem is like I like the style of my list, and once you start kind of including those elements, it really changes how the list plays. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel like in this current meta, my style of list has a lot of I don't really have a ton of bad matchups. And even my bad matchups aren't like. Can
you define the style of your list because folks maybe listening that haven't seen it or whatever?
Yeah, so generally, it is board control, hard to kill, hard to score kills off. So you'll get secondaries, like you can get your Reaper, because I have 135 models, but I have very little. I have a lot of big units, so it's hard to get a kill. Even in my game 3, the guy that I played got a kill on turn 1, and then he didn't get another one until turn 4. Right? So if I don't want you to kill anything, you won't kill anything. Like I can play it can be very hard to kind of get those kill points. It's psychic heavy with the Demon Princes and Thousand Suns element. It's got enough shooting to be able to deal with those things, but at the end of the day, it is a character heavy characters with lots of board control screens, and then setting up mortal wounds from behind, using the character rules to kind of protect my characters, and then taking over the board. And I have a lot of different tools. It's a very toolboxy list, so it doesn't do anything super well. I mean, it casts psychic powers pretty well, but as far as like, it's not super fast, it's not super shooty. It has close combat elements, but not, I would call it a close combat army. No one unit is like a, super scary list. But there's enough close combat in there that like, you don't want to just run into it. And, it can be fairly mobile actually with all the demon princes and, the ability to deep strike. So that's kind of the style, I guess. And I feel like right now especially in the ITC, now in other mission sets, it's maybe not as good, but in the ITC I found it really takes advantage of the way that the scoring works and objectives and those kinds of things.
Yeah, I dig it. No, I think it's a phenomenal list. I mean, it has a lot of subtle things in there, and the power. You don't seem to be compromising much to still get some of that power in there.
Yeah,
and mortal wounds and stuff like that.
For sure, and it's actually funny because it's not easy to play. Like I actually had a guy message me this weekend saying that he took my exact list to a tournament, and he I think his exact quote was, your list it's hard to play. It's not straightforward. We talked about movement earlier, and you really have to, I don't want to say abuse, but you really have to be very, very, you have to get the most out of the movement phase with this list. The way that you consolidate, the way that you pile in, charging, how you use your charges to kind of get across the board, because Plague Bearers only move 5 inches a turn. So you really have to use, kind of every available advantage in the movement, in movement to really get the list to work well. And it's not a list where you can just put it on the board and just cast smites, right? There's a lot of different, elements to it. So
when you mentioned putting in some of those things would change the style. How do you make, if you were to shift your list to include some of those elements, what would you actually change, and then how do you think that it would change what the list is supposed to be doing on the table?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, like right now, the list plays I try to play a 6-turn game, and, I think I maybe tabled people, I actually tabled 2 people, this weekend, my first 2 games, by turn 5, but it very rarely does that. So it's not a list that wins the game quickly. It's not a list that is overwhelmingly aggressive. It's very, very, reactive. So you kind of play this countering game where you kind of move up and you let people come to you, and then you pick and choose where you want to apply pressure, to kind of, hit them back. I think once you start adding a lot of shooting elements, that really changes, even things like dreadnoughts. One thing I find is oftentimes the kill that people do get, if they get one, is my dreadnought. So I have a dreadnought in there for a little bit of shooting, and it's the easiest thing to kill in my army because it's only 10 wounds, and if you have any sort of anti-tank, it goes down. It's fairly hard to hide. So as soon as you start adding more elements like that, you have to play a different game because
and that's what
currently,
the is on it, right? I mean, that's
yeah. For sure. And so, once you start giving up kill points, then the way that you play that list is a lot different because you have to actually play more aggressive to counteract the fact that they're going to be getting kills and you might not be, because as I said, it doesn't actually kill super quickly, which means I actually don't get more than say 1 kill a turn, often. Like it's very rare unless like the game's really turning that I get more than 1 kill, or even sometimes I'll get 2 kills. But if you're playing a list that gives up lots of kill points, then you have to also get a lot of kill points, especially in ITC. Otherwise, you're going to lose on that primary, right? And so that's kind of what I mean. Like, it changes how it plays. Once I start putting in Dreadnoughts, Derridios, Lord Discordants, those are prime targets to shoot at. So
yeah, you're choosing your opponent's move for them with some of the stuff.
And then you got to start playing more aggressive, which as I said, it changes your play style. Then you got to maybe be a bit more risky. Got to maybe put yourself in positions that you normally wouldn't do if you're playing more of a kind of deliberate, slow-paced grind and kind of long attrition war.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're kind of less at the whims of the dice with the list that you have now? I mean, I do. I think it's great because of all the kind of the large, medium and the largest size units and stuff. I think that has a lot to do with the success.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most unreliable thing on my list is my Sea-Beam Dread. It can either be it's got 2 shots, right? And the amount of times I've rolled Snake Eyes for it hits on a 2, and the amount of times I've rolled Snake Eyes feels statistically higher than it should be.
Look, you're supposed to roll the dice one at a time with your left hand. That's how you get around it.
Yeah. I guess so. But for the most part, it's like, because there's so much redundancy built in, and it's so resilient, it's hard to have really even really horrible dice kind of are mitigated, I guess, through just like the mechanics of the army. So whether you're hitting plague bearers that are -2 to hit with a 4++ and a 5+ fuel no pain, like even if they have really good dice and you have bad dice, just statistically, like getting through all those kinds of layers, you still end up with like, the swings can't be as huge as they're not giant swings.
Yeah, on a bad day, you've still got 5 models left in that unit, and they're still standing on the objective.
Right. So it definitely feels like there's not as many risky elements, and because it's so resilient, it can go like I actually go second a lot, and there's very few times where I've gone second and I feel like I've lost because I went second. Like, in fact, there's almost no match where there's been games where I've gone second and you just kind of take the hits and you just absorb it and you just move on. And it feels like, and the opponents get really upset because it feels like it had maybe a really good first turn, but then like the list just keeps going, right? Keeps going. You just won't die. So, it's just very resilient. And I think that makes it, a little bit forgiving as well.
Well, that's cool. Yeah. It's nice to hear that you're looking at revising your list, mostly because I'm interested in seeing what you come up with.
I got to kind of get back to the drawing board. What I do know is like every time I go to change it, I like write the list. I'm like, okay, this is the new list. And then I look at it and I'm like, okay, I'm going back to the old list. So I definitely have these moments where I like look at the list and I'm like, this isn't as good as the last one. So why am I doing this? So I really feel like if I do want to change, if I want to kind of change like this list, I feel like this iteration of it, and TJ has a similar version of it with some slightly different units. I kind of feel like both of us, between us, we've solved this list. Like this is kind of the best versions of this kind of list.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if I do change, I might try to do something radically different. I'm really looking forward to the Chaos Knight release, and hopefully there's some goodies in there, and maybe throwing in a few Chaos Knights could be fun. Change of pace, because playing 135 models over 5-6 games is it's exhausting. It's exhausting to move. It's exhausting to set up. It's so much work, and it's not for everyone.
No, you have to ritualize. I say this a lot. You got to ritualize what you do, your movement phases and stuff. that's
for sure.
Deployments. Yeah, I'm with you, man. Well, dude, it's really great talking with you, and I appreciate you sitting down for this long and giving us some insight into your play style and what you see out there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate having me back on, and hopefully maybe I'm sure we'll see each other at ATTC. So looking forward to grabbing a beer. Whatever else they do down there.
Yeah, well, that's about it, really. I mean, you nailed it. It's actually, I know we've talked about it, but it's in a little outside of Chattanooga, which is right on the Georgia-Tennessee border.
Yeah, hopefully it's not too hot, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I feel like I'm going to die.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you might melt coming right off the plane, or I don't know.
I know Atlanta is incredibly hot, and I can't imagine it's any cooler near Chattanooga.
I feel like it's worse.
Perfect. So
but we will definitely get some beers. That's at the very least.
Yeah.
All right, Jim. Well, again, thanks a lot, and we'll speak real soon.
Okay, man. Thanks.
Good night.
We're sponsored by Fermaterra. With their study, lightweight and portable tables, you can make war anywhere. Please visit them at www.fermaterra.com.
Hey everybody, we are back. Still got Josh and Chris here.
Hey. Poor souls.
Yeah. They tried to get me to talk about Lord of the Rings in the break.
It's going to happen. We just need Ricky here. It's a shame we missed our April Fool's goal for a show release, but there's always next year. It's
like moths to a flame. Like Dark Angel players, Lord of the Rings players, they just keep sneaking their way onto the show.
No, this is a judgment-free podcast, so it's all good.
No, my undertones were there. Thanks for the people that continue to submit reviews. It's really nice to hear, how people use us through their hobby time, listen to us through the hobby time and or help as entertainment during their day. Really read those and smile, and I appreciate it. So getting ready for this tournament, I'm all painted up. I of course made a last minute switch. I had some IG snipers in my list with the theory that they can take orders from a commander and it's going to be great. It's always going to work out. And I really wanted that utility as opposed to having ratlings. Taking a special weapon squad and having 3 of those guys take sniper rifles. Well, for a little bit more points, I could get 7 ratlings as opposed to 6 snipers and 2 other squads. So I'm going with the ratlings. That's the last switch that I've done in my list because they hit on 3s, and I figured because they're going to be in that Stormlord that I'm never going to be an opportunity to give them orders, so I might as well bank on the more reliable ballistic skill.
That makes sense. I like the models are very small too. I'm not saying you're modeling for advantage, but they're very small models.
Yeah, you bring a good point, though. Deployment, you can do some deployment shenanigans with them if the situation called for it. Yeah.
Yeah, they have an infiltrate, right?
Yeah, and they can also essentially fire and fade. They can move after they fire. So you can kind of forward put them up to block what might be an early turn in a pregame advancement or something or whatever, and then duck if you do happen to go first and that isn't an issue. You could shoot and then get out of there.
How big are the units again?
It's a 7-man unit. And that is a points consideration. I probably would prefer to have 2 5-man units or even 2 10-man units. But
my only thought on the only reason I even asked that was, in what scenarios in your mind are you running where X unit is shooting at them, and in your mind, are they surviving based off wounds, cover saves, etc.?
Well, I want to be able, in this particular list, I want to be able to threaten auras and characters and stuff, and that's why the Astra Militarum can shoot a lot. They don't have a ton outside of what are the snipers of targeting characters specifically. Now, I am burning the command points to take the operative, so the assassin. And then I'm thinking about going the Emperor's Wrath Artillery Company for that stuff we were talking about in the pre-show of just even further giving me another tool to help deal with what might be a poor matchup for me, or poor terrain features, or unhospitable terrain.
Yeah, that
features.
one's always reliable.
So let me ask a question. If I'm the opponent and looking at it, then so I see a unit of 7 sniper ratlings, and in my mind I see 4 hits, potentially 3, maybe 2 wounds a turn, and then once a game a mortal wound coming at me. I mean, what am I really going to dedicate to killing that? You know what I mean? Like, is that something you're kind of banking on? Is that they're not going to draw enough attention and you can get some chip damage? Or that plus the Vindicator, you're looking at taking out, a slam captain in 2 turns or something? Like, what are you thinking?
What I'm thinking is they're going to be extra firepower coming out of the back of that tank. That's what I'm thinking. And they'll basically be able to fire. I'll get 6 turns of shooting out of them. And over the first couple of turns that I will take out a 4 or less wound character that could be potentially buffing up, giving extra attacks or reroll wounds or whatever to things that keeps my stuff on the table longer.
So you don't ever see them getting out then? Okay.
I don't, but I want the option to do it. I figure because of they get that, the shenanigans with the deployment, I can use that if I want to, but I want my, decision tree to be, I think they're safer in the tank and they should be in the tank, and I'm going and treat them almost like a gun for the tank. It's cheaper and more effective than if I were to try to slap another heavy bolter, sponsor on them or whatever.
I see what you're saying now.
In my opinion, this is what's playing out in the testing that I'm doing. So it's a little bit of an educated opinion, at least for what I've running up against. I'm treating them like another gun for the tank that can target characters. And that way, I'm not always having to pick the Vindicator Assassin as my Imperial Operative. Even though that on a previous show, we've talked about that should be your first pick. You need to really... You need to really consciously decide, or if you're going anything other than that, it needs to be really considered.
Well, I mean, I think what we're dancing around the topic, but really is what's going to happen is, and this is just me projecting, right, is you'll probably end up picking the Vindicator. You'll probably fire the Vindicator first, and then you'll use the snipers, the rattlings, or whatever you have to finish things off if it doesn't die, right? You'll be looking, saying, what can I do to remove X from, capability from the army? What can I do to reliably remove 2 to 3 wounds and have something, make that matter, right? Not just remove 3 models. So, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that between the 2 of them, they can take out some demon princes. They can certainly take out other like psychers that may be a problem. There are outside until you get into the demon, like the upper echelon of the demon category. The psychers don't have a massive pile of wounds. I should say that as soon as I said that, I thought about Primaris librarians and stuff like that. So I was thinking more along the lines of Imperial Guard psychers and demon heralds and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the idea. But I originally did. I've got another couple of special weapon squads in there with melta-guns, 6 melta-guns.
Cool.
That I'm also using as just extra guns on the tank.
But obviously that's a more dedicated, mass wound inflicting type unit, right? Clearly.
Yeah, and I want people to not necessarily be comfortable rushing a knight up towards me.
Okay.
I think the Stormlord and things like the Vultures with some hot rolling could put some damage on a knight over the course of a couple of rounds. But I think that with those 6 Meltaguns in there, that could potentially get out and receive some orders and stuff if necessary, are going to make people think twice.
In this scenario that you're projecting or you're talking about, is it one knight in their list, or is this just knights, period?
I'm thinking that one knight most of the time, but I think it is conceivable that because, after the Castellan, a little bit of a Castellan nerf, that the people that enjoyed playing knights, they might default to a triple knight list. Like triple gallants, I think is going to be a really strong choice in a lot of situations.
Yeah. And I think your list has the juice to take down at least a single knight in a turn. I mean, obviously they're going to have a lot more than that, right? They probably have some Ogren or something, or insert other popular army to go along with some knights. But I think 3 Stormlords and the additional Punisher should be able to, and then heck, even the wounds or some chip damage and Meltas. I don't see one knight being a huge threat to your list.
I'm playing Catachin. I put a Basilisk in the list. I had 2 Basilisks, but I ended up being 5 points over. I talked about this a little bit in the last segment. What I actually decided to do was take out 1 Basilisk and add in a second Wyvern. So basically I can shred infantry all day long, and without compromising too much, I put it in some anti-vehicle punch.
No, this is probably a horrible idea, but no Hellhound, the one with the Melta turret, and then you can run it like double Melta or whatever, right? Yeah, you could run that sideways and block with it. Use it as like people do with their flyers. Like you run it out there, you turn it sideways, so they have to go around it. The knight doesn't want to charge it because you're going to get the 2 pops or the Overwatch on it, which isn't guaranteed, but it's got range on it.
Well, you got D3 shots, and with you can reroll it with a Catachin. So you're looking at. Looking towards that 3 shots. The reason that I opted against that was because I felt like I would only ever fire them once a game.
At the same time, you're only firing them once a game. But are you preserving your strength elsewhere at that cost at a better rate than not running the Hellhound and running, whatever you're talking about instead?
No, that's a really good point. And I don't know. I have not put that configuration on the table to test it, but it's probably worth doing.
So is 1 Wyvern shooting for 3 turns better than 1 Hellhound holding up something that's going to really, gut punch your army for 1 turn a better trade? Who knows? Yeah. You'll have to play test.
Well, I'm going with the utility of being able to fire indirectly, maybe getting some reroll to wounds, and really tearing up the infantry. And then I thought to myself, man, I've really gone heavy-handed on the anti-infantry. How do I make myself at least be able to hold on against some of these high toughness, high wound models? And I've settled on this. We'll see how it goes. I've got some additional games to play. Of course, this is leading up towards the ATC, but I'm going to take some version of this list to the Master City 40k tournament coming up that's in 10 days. That's on the 22nd. And then the weekend after, we're going to have a big, practice playtest type tournament day like we did last year leading up to the ATC.
Cool.
This will evolve, but I've got more than just a handful of games in with this list so far, and I'm feeling good about where it's going, and I think it's positioning me pretty well to deal with some of the things that I may encounter out there in the wild and in this team setting where you can pick the matchups a little bit. Depending on your position on the team, you get a little bit of a stronger hand in what the matchups are.
It sounds like you're trying to fudge out of our previous conversation where you have to get at least 4 wins. And put yourself in a position to get the 5th.
That's it. That's exactly right. I think this list can do it.
Best of luck. I hope it does.
Oh, thanks, man. I am having fun using the Ogren launcher model. That's I don't know, a throwback.
Oh man, that's a throwback. Yeah.
Back when Ogren were absolutely terrible, we thought of a way to make them competitive, and the only way to do that was to actually just throw them at the enemy with a catapult. And hope.
Yes, but you'd throw Yarrick in either first or last. Which was it?
Yeah, he was in the line. He was in the line also to be launched at the enemy.
So we were talking, previously during the break about, me potentially downsizing. Here's how bad my pile of shame is. My Ogren that I own I have 10 of the metal ones. You know what I'm talking about?
With the Ripper guns and the horns on their helmet and stuff?
No. The ones that you never see that were after those. Like, no one has those. There's the in-between. I don't know how to describe them. They only have Ripper guns. They don't have slab shields and all that other stuff. But they're not the like derpy ones. They're the
Does one have an
previous. No, I know which ones you're talking about. They look a lot like the fantasy, like Minotaurs from way back in like. No, not those ones. There was. This is so embarrassing in a way. There was actually, this is how few people have them and have them seen. There was an in-between sculpt of like maybe 3 different Ogren and then one cyber, whatever the modified brain guy, the sergeant.
Not Dead Orc or Dead Og or something.
Sure, right? Counts as. But yeah, like I have those, and it's like, and I don't even play them because they don't have slab shields. I should just glue a slab shield on their back, you know. But But anyway, that's grognard stuff. Sorry.
No, it's all right. We all have those. We got those.
But I have too much of that stuff. Man.
I have some metal. They're not possessed wings. There's some metal set of wings from Fantasy Battle that they're chaos for something. But then I'm positive I'm going to use someday. So not to one up you, but I'm the same way. I have a limited number of the old Chaos Havoc backpacks, the like jet intake looking ones that are like kind of aerodynamic, if you know, and I only put those on like special. You got to be like the plasma pistol holding guy, right? Like the power fist plasma pistol.
Yes, yes.
Chaos.
So slam captain, right?
Aspiring sorcerer or whatever. Yeah.
And one day when actual normal assault Space Marines are good. I have the current, the plastic jump packs. I have the metal ones from just before where they have the 3 little angular exhaust nacelles inside the one big exhaust that I've just been holding on to build like an actual assault squad. And 30K or 40K, I'm just waiting. So.
Hey, 30K. Yeah, we may see a resurgence soon on that.
Well, the new book is really good. We don't want to go down that road because I'll talk Blood Angels and 30K and the new White Scars Keshigs and stuff, man. Those things are looking good.
Oh, man. The Keshig Terminators are legit.
Well, the golden Keshig stuff. There's some real savage stuff in 30K, everyone knows. But the new book, if you've been waiting to get in for White Scars and Blood Angels and you're afraid that it's trailed off and you don't want to pull the trigger on it, I highly recommend people double down and look into it again and get into it, man. That new book, even the Demons of the Ruinstorm stuff is really solid. I like that.
That's wild. It's all very wild, but it's a lot of fun.
And the demons, I like that they sculpted them with like the old Bellicor aesthetic. They're not so I don't know. They're just kind of different than all the other plastics GW currently makes. But I digress.
That's all cool. Demons are what I'm looking forward to. I mentioned this before with the contrast paints. And I know that Josh, you got your hands on contrast paints this past weekend.
I did. I went down to my local GW and painted on their dime, on their figs. It was a great time.
So what were some of the standout colors that you saw, or maybe what some other people were doing?
So I tried just about every single color they had, right? And the first thing I would tell everyone, because I'm sure everyone's been on the internet and they've got their own opinions already, but having actually used them, it absolutely matters what the undercoat is going to be that you put it over, for one. I personally preferred the Wraithbone because I thought that the warmth of the Wraithbone added a lot to anything that naturally has yellows in it. It looked really good in, greens. It looked really good with browns. It looked really good with oranges. It just warms. It played well to the warms. I found that the gray actually worked better with some of the, other, obviously the opposite, right? That said, I was really hoping, because I think I mentioned before, I'm staring down the barrel of all that undead stuff when it finally arrives.
Yeah, skeletons, yeah.
I was really hoping Skeleton Horde was going to be my jam. And it's a little bit lighter than I wanted. And I started noticing that colors I thought by name would be like the go-to. I was a shade off, and there were some other paints that did it a little bit better for me. So I really liked, I don't know what the name is, shame on me. There was a darker, not the super dark like branch wood, wood color, but there was another shade darker than Skeleton that I really liked. I was not a huge fan of the Iandan yellow, the super orangey yellow that you're seeing out there. It does exactly what it says it does as advertised, but when it pools in the recesses, it's a little more orangier than I like, and I prefer my golds to be a little more brown in hue. I like them to tilt toward amber a little bit more. So Nazdreg yellow, I feel really strong recommending that to people if they've not had a chance to try it and they want to buy a few colors and they want to do a yellow. I highly recommend Nazdreg. Oddly enough, the Creed green was a go-to like olive drab color.
Okay.
And that actually looked really good over both finishes. So if you got some Cadian stuff out there, some fatigues, man, I feel like that's a strong recommend. If you're a big fan of like the old, 4th edition, 3rd edition Ultramarines where they were like that really like Smurf blue, I thought that the Talisar blue was really good. It was that throwback instant like, oh man, look at this. And it was really good over the Wraithbone. So those 4 colors right there were really and the reds. Obviously, Paul, we know you're not going to change your recipe, but if you guys want to do a quick and dirty Blood Angel, man, throw that Blood Angel red or the other darker one, the Flesh Terror one on there. 2 great colors. But
I'm too far down the rabbit hole for that, man.
Yeah, no, I hear you. But you just, I would say you should probably have one as a pocket like pin shade color. Like if you need to do the recesses of the cracks of your say you need to line the edges of your tanks or something, right? And you don't want to use. You don't have to use Nuln Oil to do your recess shading anymore. You can start using these things. Going back down to the direction I was trailing before, I think that people have to be conscious of the finish that the paints have going forward because I don't know if they're glossy or matte, but it's going to be a little bit trickier to blend them into the rest of your opaque palette that you may be accustomed to using. It's not just a base coat, highlight, wash, blend type deal, and then pick out the details anymore. If you're going to start with these, you need to, you may even be putting them over some of your previous opaque colors rather than the prescribed primer, right? Because even though they advertise it as one thick coat, if that's how you're going to do it, and you plan on going back later, are you just going to be wiping out everything it did, or are you going to be using it to accelerate your schedule? So you have to figure out some play. And that's what we're not seeing a lot of on YouTube. And I think everyone's going to have to play with that for themselves. And that's where you're going to see some really creative, stuff is when you start seeing people pre-shading, highlighting, and then applying them. I think you'll see some pretty magical things popping out there.
Dude, what's his name on Twitter? Is it Darren Latham?
Don't get me started on Darren, bro. That guy has me upset.
Well, I mean, he did non-metal metallic. He's like, this is what I just whipped out with the contrast paints. So
good. Disgustingly good.
I mean, so obviously, but it's just a technique, right? It's a tool. And, what you do with the tool is, I can't wait till we see what is really possible. And that's probably on like the top end of what you can do with it.
Well, I read his note on that post, actually. He said that it was a little bit messier than when he uses his normal acrylics, but once again, it was much faster, right? But he applied it in so much more precise way than I had even thought about doing it. Because, once again, you go in there, the GW guy looks at you, tells you you're 5 years old and says, no, you're doing it wrong. One thick coat. And so you blob it on there, with a medium size, a brush, not something you might normally use, just to try the effect out so you get used to it. And then you go home and you look at Twitter and Darren Latham posts, some of the best non-metallic you've ever seen with, fine grace and acumen. So it's just whatever, man. That guy is so sick.
Definitely can't wait to see, get my hands on it. I should get my hands on it this week and then try some as well. Yeah, thanks for that insight. I think as we're going to see more and more people with different skill levels get their hands on it. I saw one picture that, I don't think there's any help in this guy paint. And I'm not hobby shaming. I'm never ever going to do that, but it was just like a wake up. It was like, okay, cool. There is going to take some skill in this. I understand that. I understand that going into it. Changing gears just a little bit. I'll give a review on this next episode, but I finished the Attack of the Necron Warhammer Adventure story. So the one geared towards younger audiences. And I liked it. I'll tell you why I liked it on the next episode. And I started the City of Lifestone, which is the Sigmar side of it. And so far, me and my youngest, we're not too super deep into the City of Lifestone, but it starts out a little bit darker than the 40k side of it. So I'm curious to see where it goes.
Cool.
Yeah. So more to come on that.
I think it's an audiobook. I was bummed. I wanted an actual regular book. I'm kind of jazzed for that Gotrek story that's coming out. So,
dude, I am excited for that and for the model that's coming out for him. Did you see that?
Yeah, no spoilers, right? But I think we all know what's going on, and I really hope that he's just murdering his way all the way to Nagash, and he's just going to grab Felix's soul or whatever and reincarnate Felix. I don't need the old books rehashed in AOS. But there is part of me that does like those books, and that was one of the fonder things I liked about the old fantasy battle.
Yeah, they were basically a pillar in the story.
Yeah. So if he's just some psychopath murdering his way to Nagash, and he just like, oh man, I'm so ready to read some just silliness right now. So.
Oh man, cool. Yeah. Did you listen to the Realm Slayer audio drama that Brian Blessed did?
No, I did not.
Dude, you've got to check that out. Like, I don't know if you've got an Audible subscription or something, but check it out. It is wonderful. I couldn't imagine a better voice for Gotrek.
Yeah.
Cool. Absolutely. Good for the recommend. Thanks.
Well, guys, thanks y'all for joining me. We will be back next week. More stuff. Hopefully this special segment that we inserted into this episode will make up for the week we missed when I was traveling, and things are back to normal. Going to have some tournament reports coming up. Yeah. Fun stuff. As always, thanks a lot for listening.
All right. Have a good night. Have a good day.
See you guys.
All right, bye.
Cheers.
I am Groot.